Hey guys, welcome to Shareably Delicious, where today we're going to show you how to make a chicken stew with potatoes and carrots. The whole process will take about 4 to 6 hours, but the result is worth it. Let's take a look at the ingredients we'll need. The first thing is very important. It's a thick bottom pot that holds at least 6 quarts. The thickness of the pot is important because otherwise it'll be very easy to burn the food. Next, you'll need 10 ounces of seasoning blend, which is what we call the Trinity here, a mixture of onions, bell peppers, and celery. You'll need 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil to coat the bottom of your pot. Season oil of your choice. We tend to use Tony Chachere's because it's made locally. You'll need at least 16 ounces of roux, but the exact amount will depend on your desired consistency. You need 1 teaspoon of minced garlic, which is not pictured here, and from a jar is fine. You need 3 large white potatoes and about 4 carrots. 7 chicken thighs. First, you're going to pour in the vegetable oil and turn your burner to medium-high heat. Swirl the oil around to make sure it coats the bottom of your pot. Give this about a minute to heat up and pour in about half the bag of seasoning blend. Add a few sprinkles of seasoning and stir. Now you'll start to cook it down, which means letting the vegetables get tender and somewhat brown. Let the seasoning blend cook for a few minutes without stirring until you hear sizzling and see that there isn't much oil left in the pot. Now add a little bit of water, just enough to barely cover the bottom of the pot, and use a non-metal spoon or spatula to quickly scrape any brown bits from the bottom. Now you'll repeat this process. Leave it alone for a minute or two until you hear sizzling and there's barely any water left in the pot. You'll repeat this process probably 4 times or until you can see that the seasoning blend is cooked down and browned, like you can see here. Now it's time to add enough water to make the gravy. You'll start out by adding about 1 gallon of water and be sure you've scraped everything from the bottom of the pot at this point. Cover and wait for the water to boil. Once it's boiling like this, it's time to add the roux. You can see that we added by spoonfuls, not an exact measurement because it's up to the cook to decide how thick they want the gravy to be. I would say at this stage, we probably add about 7 ounces of roux. Don't worry if you don't know how much you think you'll like because over the next several hours, you'll be tasting and adding more roux if you want it thicker. Start stirring, add in 1 teaspoon of minced garlic, and then season to your liking. We personally add 8 teaspoons of season oil at this stage. Remember though, you'll continue tasting throughout this process, so you can add more seasoning later if you like. Now since you've just added the roux, it's crucial to continue stirring until all of the roux is dissolved. You'll know when you don't see or feel any more clumps like this. Be sure to scrape your spatula around the bottom of the pot because roux is known for getting stuck and burning down there. Once you're sure the roux is dissolved, put the lid on and let the roux continue to cook at a slight boil, which should be about medium-low heat. Okay, we're at the most time-consuming part, and it may seem like you're wasting a lot of time just cooking roux, but getting the base right is the key to a delicious, flavorful stew. At this point, the roux will continue to cook for several hours, but after the first 30 minutes, you should taste for flavor. Know that you'll definitely taste the undercooked roux, but right now you're checking for seasoning and seeing how thick your roux is. We usually add another spoon or 2 of roux and a little more seasoning at this stage. Continue to taste every 30 minutes and add more roux or seasoning as you feel necessary. Be aware though that every time you add more roux, you'll need to cook the stew even longer or run the risk of tasting undercooked roux in your end product. While the roux is cooking, you'll need to prep your carrots and potatoes. We always wash, peel, and then chop them. Be sure the pieces you are cutting are a consistent size. They don't have to be perfect, but you want them to all be cooked at the same time. Believe me, biting into a hard potato is not appetizing. Once your gravy is the desired consistency, it's time to add the carrots and potatoes. You can turn the heat up to medium-high so that when you add these vegetables, it won't take as long to return to boiling. Stir a little, then put the lid back on and continue to cook. Remember, you'll want to maintain a slight rolling boil. At the next 30-minute check, you should expect to add a little more seasoning, usually just salt for us, since potatoes tend to soak up seasoning. Now while that's cooking, let's prep the chicken. Just like the veggies, be sure to cut the pieces into even sizes. We find it easiest to cut the thighs first into strips, then cut the strips into cubes. Next, season the chicken to taste. For me, if I can't see seasoning on every piece, it isn't enough. Now it's a waiting game, as every 30 minutes you'll continue to stir, check for taste, and check for tenderness of the vegetables. You can do this by tasting one, or by just stabbing it with a fork to see if it's soft enough. While you're deciding if the stew is seasoned enough, you need to consider that after you add the chicken, it will taste less seasoned. I've often made the mistake of thinking I had a perfectly seasoned stew while tasting from the pot, but once we actually served it, it was obvious I should have seasoned it a little more. Once you feel the stew consistency, seasoning, and vegetables are where you want them to be, add the chicken to the pot. Stir it well, make sure the stew is boiling, and let it cook for 30 minutes. Now you're done. We serve this savory stew with white rice, a side of boiled eggs, and good company.